know everything's okay, and I'm assuming everyone else can. And to start with, first, I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity, especially Connie for organizing it and putting it together. And it was kind of a tradition with Audley. He often did year-end meditations or year-end classes or things over as the year came to an end or as we started a new year, so that it would help us all to do better. And kind of some of the traditions, especially in the Asian traditions, they say that whatever you do on the first day of the year or at the beginning of the year, it tends to direct your course throughout the rest of the year. So it's good that people have interest and are turning to the spiritual side of themselves, especially in these times. It's been quite a challenging year, I think, for everybody. It's been some of the greatest difficulties, but also some of the greatest blessings have come to me in this year. So I'm most grateful for that and for this opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit about who I am. My name is Ben Davidson, or as the full name is Benjamin Franklin Davidson. I got stuck with that from my grandfather and my dad, and it's been a good name that served me well. But I grew up in Oklahoma, spent the early part of my life there, and there was a reason that I went to Oklahoma, and I'll tell you one short story that I often share when I talk. When I first met Audley in Oklahoma City, 1970, I had gone to a facility, a place called the New Age Center, where my father had suggested I go sometime, and I went, and it was a Friday evening, and the owner of that center and the director of it, he said, I knocked on the door and I was, way too early, but he said, you're in great luck. We have one of the most special teachers here from Oklahoma City this evening, and he'll be doing a lecture on beginning meditation. And I thought, wow, this is just fantastic. I always wanted to learn about meditation. And he let me in, and I sat for a while and looked at some of the materials. And then this guy named Audle Allison walked in, and he had a brilliant colored shirt with a beautiful tie that was kind of an effervescent blue, and then a jacket. He was really dressed up, and he had a pin across his tie that was quite common in those days, and it had 12 stones in it, and they were rubies and emeralds and all that kind of stuff. And he said these help balance his energy, and he was quite a character. And the drawing that's shown in the page here of the what he called the kingdom he had just completed that drawing for this class. And and so I sat down with about 8 or 10 other people, and he began his lecture. And he went through and explained this kingdom drawing to us. And then he explained what is meditation briefly in the traditions that he had been taught. And then he had us meditate. And when we meditated, each of the things that he had described about the kingdom, somehow or another, I was blessed to be able to, I guess, be in his presence and see those things as real as, I can see my computer in front of me right here. And we went through the basic meditation and became aware of the energy in our bodies, the life force. And then we directed our sense perception inwardly, and we came to, to hear sounds and see lights, or some of us did. And then he said, let's just sit quietly and meditate. And when we did, an image came in my mind of, I saw myself standing on a battleship in the Pacific Ocean in World War II. And I was one of the officers on the ship, and there were 4 other gentlemen with me, 2 on each side. And we were talking and kind of joking and going on as this movie unfolded. And then one of the gentlemen pointed out into the ocean, and there were 2 torpedoes coming right at the ship. And I remember turning to each individual, looking in their eyes and their face, and everybody had that expression of, this is it. We were getting ready to be blown up. And we were, and I was thrown in the water, injured badly, floated, sank into the ocean, and then went into a darkness and spent what turned out to be, seemed like an instant at that time, but what turned out to be 4 or 5 years. And then I remembered that I had known Audley Allison, and and when I thought of him, I immediately began to fly through the air in my vision, and took birth in Oklahoma so that when I became of age, I could find him and learn from him. And so that was kind of how I came to know him. It's a little bit of an unusual story, but he was an unusual man. And when you were in his presence, often unusual things happen. And many people had that experience. And as they did, they were also drawn to him in a way, some consciously from other times, and some just were in his presence and they found a great blessing and a great feeling. And let me see if okay. And so who was Audley Allison and what was he other than that? Um, he was born in 1915, I think in Troy, Missouri, or 1917, November 15th, and passed away, left this world January 29th, 1988. And I knew him during the time from 1970 to 1988, and was a constant student with him and spent a lot of time and learned a lot of things. What we want to do today is we've done kind of the introduction stuff. I like to always start with possible just a brief meditation, and then I want to talk about Audley the man, the teachers that were in his life, his influences, his life, his teaching, and then try to do just kind of a key teachings, do a little summary, and then another I would say concentration meditation, centering meditation, relaxing. We can take a break, and then we'll take questions and get into that. And one quote that when I first met him, he gave me a little book called The Truth Journal it was published by Roy Eugene Davis and his center in Lakemont, Georgia. And there was a quote in it that really stuck with me: seek truth in meditation, not in moldy books. Look into the sky to see the moon, not in the pond. And I think that stuck out for me. And I told him I really liked that. And he said, oh yeah, you really would. But I had just completed, was at that time working on a degree in philosophy, an undergraduate degree at Oklahoma State University, and then went on through graduate school. So he knew I tended to lock onto books, and he thought you can learn some things from them, but it's better to go to the source and find out what's going on in life. Audley as a man, one thing he said, and I think I first saw this quote from the Buddha, but he said, "Don't believe a word I say. If you believe me, you'd believe any damn fool." And he left off the part about the damn fool in most of his public lectures because he felt he needed to be more proper, and we were in a different time. But I think it's always a good thing to remember. And it helps you focus your mind, and it helps you to discriminate if you consider what people say, but don't just take them wholeheartedly and buy into them. You can go down some really strange rabbit holes and go into some strange places believing everything. This was Audley as a baby, and kind of an interesting, beautiful child. After he was born, 2 years later, his brother was born, and his mother passed away in childbirth. So he was raised by a stepmom and a dad. And then when I met him, I think I took this picture in sometime midsummer, late summer 1970. And he always talked about, when in the tradition that one of the traditions, especially that he was tied to, was the Sikh tradition. And in that tradition, the guru or the teacher is paramount and a very valuable part of the teaching. And he said concentrating on the image of the teacher can help one awaken or enlighten and attain enlightenment. So I took a picture and had it developed, took it home, and I used that. And this was my favorite go-to picture for many, many years. And then people took lots of pictures of him and showed him in different ways, but they were good images that captured what he was and his essence. And I always liked this one also. And then he was in the tradition, the lineage holder in the tradition of the Sikh. He was a Sat Guru, or a true guru. one that knew the very source of life, and had touched I guess the essence of what he was, and he could express that. And he was really quite a great teacher. His Satguru, or his teacher, was a gentleman named Dr. Bhagat Singh Thin, and he was from India, came to the U.S. in 1919, and began teaching and sharing his knowledge, and traveled all around the country. And he came to Oklahoma City, and Audley met him and began to study with him. And that's when his life began to unfold. But one of the things that brought Audley to the teaching is, as a young man, he was began to have a spiritual yearning to know about the truth in life. And at some point in his early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, he began to wake up psychically, or wake up aware of other levels of beings and other entities, and all kinds of things, and had a very difficult time for a number of years in trying to navigate through that. And when he found his teacher, he found that, he was simply out in the etheric worlds, and not following the straight and narrow path, or that path of the holy Nam. And as he began to practice that, all those things that were bothering his consciousness, they simply disappeared, and he began to master the flow of energy and master concentration, so that he could go deep in himself, and he was no longer bothered. And through he spending time with his guru, and he would come to Oklahoma City every few months, and provide lectures, and typically lectures for a week, and do some meditation. And then Audley was following him around the country. And then in a session in Dallas, when he was meditating with his master, he had a complete enlightenment and saw the truth about what he was. And then other key parts of his life, he was married to this lovely lady, Pauline, and they had clearly a very loving relationship. If you knew him, you knew Pauline. She was always around, kind of as the gatekeeper for the meetings and the sessions that we had. And in time, we all loved her as much as we loved him. And then he was also a boxer. He was a Golden Glove champion in the state of Oklahoma when he was in college. He was also an athlete, and did some crazy things. This is one of him diving. That was another smile I liked. This was another image of him in the military. He was on a basketball team, and I think they won a state championship or something. And this was the guys. And clearly, different time, different place, but some interesting guys, and they were all pretty dapper, I think, for that period of time. And he really enjoyed life. In that he loved to dance, he loved to do his art. He was a businessman. He founded or was a founding member with his brother of Capitol Hill Monument Company. He was a graphic artist and painted pictures, but also carved stone, did monuments for people, and really counseled people and helped them. And but he was always, trying to get all of his students to not take themselves or yourself too seriously. And, I came to see that karma based on ego infatuation of itself, if you get too serious about life, or too holy as a teacher, or too wild and enforcing strict rules on people and stuff like that, a lot of times, you just get lost, and that's not necessarily where you want to be. So, he played with all of us. He was really a kid like the rest of us, and the silliest guy in many cases that you would ever meet, but he made life fun. And so he was an adventurer, an artist, an athlete, a boxer, pole vaulter, track, basketball, all those things. He was an author, wrote books, and wrote many lectures and stuff. Didn't publish so much, but he was a phenomenal dancer, an explorer of other worlds. I watched him heal people from all sorts of things. And, he could touch the source and transmit that energy to others that would help them heal. As we saw, he was a loving husband. He was a magician, and you can take that any way you want. But he was an amateur magician and did a lot of magic shows and had me often participate in those. And he was the only man I ever knew that got me to dress up as a woman. And got me to pretend to be a swami and pretend to be a witch and a lot of things. But he made it a lot of fun for me. And then he was a map maker, or I call it a cartographer. He drew maps of the kingdom, and he showed us how we could move through that. He was a master craftsman, a meditation master, memorial stone carver, Satguru, complete self and God-realized being, a soldier, a storyteller, a successful businessman, a teacher, a traveler, a true friend, and a wizard. And this is an image I always liked because he was smiling, and would often use it for meditation. And he passed along a little quote from Paramahansa Yogananda in the Kriya Yoga lineage that said, read little, meditate more, and love God with all your heart. And that's a key thing, that if you keep focus on that, that's all you need to really do. And Audley was a lineage holder in at least two key traditions that are still around today. The path of the Holy Nam through his root guru, Dr. Bhagat Singh Thin. That's a Sikh tradition that wear the turbans. And then the path of Kriya Yoga through Roy Eugene Davis. And he was also recognized and given spiritual names and gifts by many teachers alive during his lifetime. One of those was Swami, name that he was given was Swami Shivananda. That was given to him by Swami Muktananda of the Siddha Yoga tradition. Swami Nirvanananda, there was another name he was given at the inner levels. And then he received pictures from Ram Dass. When he traveled to Oklahoma City and met Audley, he learned that Audley truly had a great devotion to the teacher known as Babaji from the Kriya Yoga tradition. And he talked for a while with Audley, and then he excused himself and he went out to the little Volkswagen Beetle that or Volkswagen van, I guess it was, that he was driving around the country and at that time giving lectures and teaching people. And there was a picture on his dashboard or several pictures of spiritual teachers, and he had a picture of Babaji that had been given to him by Baba Hari Das, who was kind of the one of the teachers of Ram Dass, and he was the teacher that taught him. His Ram Dass's guru was Neem Karoli Baba, but he said, I won't teach you, Baba Hari Das will. And Baba Hari Das had actually written a book about Babaji, and he had a few of the original pictures that were ever done of him. And since Ram Dass saw it meant so much, he presented that picture to Audley. And then in the Sikh tradition, these were the main lineage holders in that tradition that we know of, and some of the students of Audley have researched this extremely well and in a lot of depth, and follow it closely. You can see that some people think there's a similarity between the way he looks and that he may have been one of these teachers in another lifetime in that tradition. And then in the Kriya Yoga tradition, Audley was in line through Babaji, Lahiri Mahasaya, Sri Yukteswar, Roy Eugene Davis, who was a student of Paramahansa Yogananda. And I got to know Roy quite a lot. He was, as you can see, much younger than a lot of us, but lived a long time. And I've been fortunate to have an opportunity to spend time with him in this lifetime. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago, but he established many centers around the country and around the world to teach the Kriya lineage. And I talked to Roy once, and just to ask him his impressions of Audley, and he said he was a very beautiful spiritual man that was extremely devoted to Babaji. He said, I think he found it a little challenging to be devoted to me because I was a young man and he had already had his awakening and his enlightenment. So he really didn't need a guru. But Roy said he had fully ordained and authorized Audley to teach Kriya Yoga, and that anyone that Audley initiated into that tradition, or any of his students that he initiated and taught in that tradition, they would truly be in that line of the Kriya lineage. And one experience I had with Roy, he was in San Jose, California, a few years ago at one of the Kriya Yoga Congresses. And I talked with him for a while, and then he gave a lecture and did the Kriya initiation or Kriya blessing, where they touch the forehead and touch the heart. And they, as Audley described it, reverse the polarity of energy from the lower part of your kingdom to the upper, so that it would make it easier for you to know the divine. And Roy he spends 1 to 2 minutes with each student when he did this, and that's still done by the teachers in the tradition today. And when he put his hand on my forehead, I could see that tunnel of energy all the way back to Babaji, and could see really a presence. And I had my eyes closed, but when I opened my eyes, Roy looked at me. He winked, knowingly, and then gave me a blessing. And in his teaching, he taught and initiated literally thousands of students. He founded what was around 1975, an organization called the Lotus Center in Oklahoma City. And that was later changed name to the Christ Center. He always had great devotion to Jesus and to the Christ principle, to that Christ awareness. And when he taught it and when he showed it, he simply went into a beautiful golden light that he described in his drawings as above his head. And when he got into that light, he would become so filled with that Christ awareness. And he did paintings of it. And I think I've got one here, and another one came in just a few minutes ago that if people want it, we'll share that also. But when I saw him filled with that, I often, thought he was filled with the Christ. This is the old sign that used to hang there. And this is a picture of him in the center teaching students. And this is that picture. This was one of his paintings. And I think, for me, it's always been very, very beautiful and very helpful, and helped me to see him. And then there's if you search on the internet, you can find all kinds of things. He was written up in an article in the Oklahoma City paper. He taught constantly. I think this was a teaching in Wisconsin or Michigan, maybe in probably mid 70s. He was lecturing around the country a lot, and many of us went with him. But he would always, have his picture up of the kingdom and share that with us, and then explain it and explain what we were as what we really are at our own core. And it's not so much who am I, but what am I? And he helped us to have a realization and awareness of that. And then shortly after he'd completed the other drawing, he had deeper awakenings within his own consciousness, and he went much further into the source of life. And he called this the Great Supreme, and that we are a manifestation of that. And I'll talk a little more about that later. And then, he always loved his little dog, Tiny. This was a picture taken at his home. He liked to drive Cadillacs. That was another thing that he enjoyed. But he was truly a man of the world, but a man of God. And he did lots of drawings and pictures. This is one. He would often do these drawings for a student that was having a problem of some type, or when he wanted to explain some aspect of what he was seeing in the inner worlds. And so he did literally, I know hundreds, maybe thousands of drawings and sketches of what he saw, and he shared that with everything and with everyone. And he often said with this, so above, so below, and that man is a reflection of the divine, and that we come into this world, into the precious human birth to have an awakening so that we can know that. And in all of the kingdoms, all of the beings and all of the levels, what he said was that the physical form that we know, our human consciousness, it's the only plane or the only level where you can follow the path and you can achieve enlightenment, or you can see the truth beyond, because it's a point where heaven and hell meet, or the heaven and the form world meet, or the spiritual world and the physical world where they touch. And so if you take birth in that world, you can follow a teaching if it's available, or follow your own inner nature, and you can become one, have an experience with it, and know the divine. This is another aspect of that in one of his paintings. This is another, and a lot of these, there's whole lectures that explain each one of these. Some of the students have particularly interested in these, and they have spent a lot of the time in their life in trying to expand on this or expound on it, and they can explain these in great detail. I know Kevin Leslie, who is in the lecture today, he's giving lots of lectures, and there are many of the other students out there, Jerry out in Colorado, and Dana there in Oklahoma City, and Lisa and Richard, and people all over the country, sharing and still continuing to do his what he recommended for us. And then he had, because I was, the philosopher in the background, I guess there were several texts that he gave me and encouraged me to really work with, and the Holy Bible, The Radiant Road to Reality, Tested Science of Religion, from his teacher, a beautiful book, and I encourage people you can buy it and read it and study it. And then Autobiography of a Yogi, he said that was important to help understand the Kriya tradition, and then How to Know God. That was a little text that he gave me that a lot of people, I think it was a little more, philosophically oriented, and he did not like to use the Sanskrit terms as much as probably I like to. I get caught in that, but I did study that a great deal, and it's one of the root texts that he taught from, but also one of the root texts of the Kriya Yoga tradition. And there's some excellent versions of that. My favorite translations and commentary overall are done by Baba Haridas. There's a 4-volume set that deals with each one of the sections, and that's available on Amazon if you have interest. And then he gave me a couple of texts that I still carry around with me, and I've studied in depth, probably not as much as I should, but India's Message to America, and then The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. And The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ, he had heard about that text, and this was 1970 time frame, and he had heard about it earlier in his life, and looked for a copy of it. And he was with his friend Sadhu Grewal, who was another teacher friend of that had come from India, that traveled with him a lot, and he was also a student of Dr. Thin. And they were in a used bookstore in New York City, and sometime in the late 60s, and they found it in a used bookstore, and I think he paid $300 or $400 for it at that time, because it was considered a rare book. And this is available today, and you can get updates or prints to it. It's no longer copyrighted or anything, but it is available, and you can get the text from it on any of these online. Just download them. And just a quick sample of what those books are, and what they were always kind of special to me. And then his teachings, I think for me it all came down to perspective, and like I like to look at it from this perspective. And I came by some of these drawings at one point in time. One of the 6th astronaut to walk on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, came to Oklahoma City with Dr. Elmer Green from the Manager Institute in Topeka, Kansas. And they were at that time going around the country lecturing. And when Dr. Mitchell was coming back from the moon, he had an epiphany or an awakening. And he looked out and saw the Earth. And when he saw the Earth, he realized that there were no borders drawn. It was an opening for him that he looked at the Earth, and then he looked into space and saw the emptiness or the vastness of space and the stars. And then, he looked back, and saw the moon. This was just as they were leaving the moon. And this is called Earthrise. It was an image that was captured, and And but when he saw that, he saw the oneness of all things. And he came back and also set up a center to study this from a scientific perspective, all of the aspects of consciousness. And that group is located in Petaluma, California, and they have a resort center there called Earthrise. And I'm very fortunate to be able to work with the scientists there and work with the people that organize that, and have met these people also. But they were key influences in Audley's life. And then for me, or how I view the teaching personally, is an effort to validate the path of meditation. You know, and especially if he says start with, don't believe a word I say, you know, you can either accept everything or you can test it for yourself. You don't have to argue about it, but you can test to see if it's true. So first you want to understand the information, the core teaching. Then you want to test the information. Is it accurate and clear? And then correct the information if it's in error. And I think it's so easy when we have a spiritual teaching or a spiritual or religious tradition, is that we are often, we take it as dogma, you know, and we feel very strong and we're ready to go to war and maybe even ready to kill people because they see it a little differently than we do. And I think Audley always tried to encourage me to see that each person, each being sees the path slightly differently within themselves. And when you see that, if you get upset at because their path is, or their image or their words are a little different than yours, and you want to kill them, then you know you haven't really got to the source. You're still dealing with the ego level of it. And so I think what he encouraged me to do was try to refine and improve the description and the language that's used to describe the path, to use the best possible metaphors and analogies to describe it, and try to make it current and alive. Like when Audley was around, we didn't have an internet and we didn't have a lot of the things we have today. So there's ways to describe things that make them more clear now than we ever were able to before. And he encouraged me to explain them in terms of current scientific, linguistic, religious, and spiritual terms, make it easy, clear, and concise. And then to be accurate. Useful diagrams and drawings and illustrations, maps, tables. He said, do as much of that as you can. And then use examples supporting scientific information for meditation. Because sometimes people think, well, it's just a religious thing, you know, and that. But as people have actually researched this, and there's been a great number of books written in the past 20 years, especially, that, you know, look at the scientific validation or the scientific phenomena associated with meditation. And not only does it make you feel good and help you achieve enlightenment, but there are many practical things that make it better in your life. One of the good texts that I like to recommend to people is Shinzen Young's book on the science of enlightenment. Is an excellent place to start. Another one, if you like more of a scientific bent than that, Altered Traits, that's done. I know Richard Davidson at University of Michigan is one of the authors that put that together, but they really study it. They map the brain waves and they do all these things. And then another student, one of Roy Davis's students at Dr. Marty Whitkey in Santa Barbara, California. He has a large neurofeedback clinic and helps a lot of people in that way. But he started 25 years ago mapping brainwaves for people in meditation and found that advanced meditators definitely have a different set of brainwave patterns than normal people on the street. And I think it's critical that as you study, and Audley emphasized discrimination. His teacher, Dr. Thin, emphasized it even more. He was a little tougher in some ways, but he said if you didn't have a good mind and know how to discriminate, you could never find the truth of life. And I'm not sure it's that hard, but I know without discrimination, it's easy to get lost. And so it's important to be able to do it. And then the guru or the guru yoga, I considered that just a map. And it's a map that describes what's happening to us, or what the kingdom, what we are. And if you sit down and actually follow the practices, you can actually validate it for yourself. And then there's what I've come to see through the work of Ken Wilber helped me clarify a lot of these things and refine my own thinking and thoughts about it, but it's that we have states of consciousness, and that's what is waking up, and then we have stages of consciousness, and that's what he refers to as growing up. And he always says states are free; they can be experienced in peak experiences, or by practice and meditation. And the states of consciousness, we experience those every day. But the stages of consciousness, that's how we develop and how we learn. It's like learning to be nice, learning to control your temper, learning to be kind to others, things like that. Those you cannot peak beyond those. You can't go to other levels. Where in the states of consciousness, a lot of times people have an awakening. Like probably one of the most famous in our Western culture is in the Bible. The Apostle Paul is walking along the road, and the Spirit opens up so strongly within him that he's blinded for 3 days. And that's a peak experience. And often if you're very tired, or you're struggling in some way, or through a drug-induced experience or a fatigue experience, you will peak at different states or have different awareness and consciousness. And I find that probably 25 to 30% of the people that I meet in teaching, they have had at some point in their life a peak experience in consciousness where they experienced the state of oneness with all things, or where they had an out-of-body experience where they were fairly, very conscious. And that one in particular, that's what brought me to want to even understand or seek to learn about meditation. As I began to have these out-of-body experiences when I'd lay down to go to sleep, and I'd see visions and do all sorts of things. And I was closely tied to the Baptist church, working with a minister, doing these revivals and stuff, and traveling around the country with him. This was my first year of college. And when I had these experiences and I talked to my ministers and my friends about it, they all thought I was, had somehow or another got in contact with the devil. And it was a very bad thing, and that I should stay away from it. And so I went to different ministers, and I found one. He says, I don't know. He says, it talks about things like that in the Bible. And he said, it's talked about as the gifts of the Spirit, or knowing other things. And he said, I've known you for a long time, and you seem like a pretty decent guy, so I don't think it's the devil. He says, I don't know what it is, but I'll pray with you. And he prayed with me, and he said, no, I know you will find someone that can help you understand it. And that's when I ended up, finding Audley Allison as a teacher. And stages are hidden structures. This is one thing that's like, it's like the structure of grammar in our language. They're hard to find or tease out, but the stages have been studied by sociologists and psychologists in great depth, and there's a phenomenal amount of work written about it today. And one that people are often very familiar with is the work of Abraham Maslow, and the stages of development. And he gives a very good picture that can be very useful to help you understand what's happening in your world. And then the states of consciousness, I like to start at a place like this when I talk about the teachings. And we all experience them all the time. This is what we are. And we have waking consciousness. And I think most of us are at this point awake, conscious. I'm speaking, you're listening. We're all sitting somewhere. You probably feel the pressure of your body on the chair. And that's a good question. Is it the pressure of your body or the pressure of the chair holding you up that you're feeling? But you're conscious. You think you're aware. And sometimes in our waking consciousness, we are really more absent-minded than we think. And the best example for me there is when I'm driving a car someplace that I've been, like to my work or something, somewhere I go every day. I get in the car, and I'm pretty conscious and awake when I get in the car. And then I start driving, and I'm either doing mantra or listening to a book, or maybe talking with someone on the phone. And then I pull in at work, and I have no idea how I got there. And so I think I was awake during that, but it helps me to see that even waking consciousness has big gaps in how we perceive the world. And then there's dream consciousness. And we all, I don't think I've ever met anyone who hasn't had a dream in their life, but a process in the body is when we sleep, we rise in awareness to a level that's defined in the scientific perspective as rapid eye movement. And they say generally that's an indication that you're having a dream. And if you wake someone up, if you watch them while they're sleeping and their eyes are moving back and forth, and you wake them up, and they'll remember a dream at that point. But that process helps us integrate stress, trauma, and things in our life. But sometimes in dreams, we see other beings, we do things, sometimes we have great fears, but it's the unknown. Some people call it the subconscious, but it's another part of, or another stage of consciousness. And then there's sleep that we all have. And I think it's deep sleep, no dreams. And we think, well, it's like, well, how could it be a state of consciousness if I'm not aware of anything? Well, there is some part of you, if you examine it very closely and look deeply, there's some part of you that's aware that you were asleep. And if you don't believe me, you can test this on your partner or your friends, or, when they're asleep, wake them up. I would say gently, because they might be, startled and upset at you. But when they come back to consciousness and look up at you, they'll say, why did you mess up my sleep? Or, they may hit you, or they may do anything, but they know that you can ask them, well, it's like you weren't moving. I wanted to make sure you weren't dead. No, I was just asleep. Every one of them says that. There's a part of us that's aware of it. And that part is defined in most of the traditions as Turiya. Turiya simply means fourth state, and it's a non-dual pure consciousness. And that part of yourself, and Audley would probably define it. I think the term he used was Godhead, the God awareness. And when he talked about that, it's that part that's aware of you at all time. It's just like, even when you're in your waking consciousness, you can close your eyes, or you can just sit there, and there's some part of you that knows that you're having an experience, that you're talking, that you're conscious. When you're having a dream, if you get shocked out of the dream in some way, or it's a nightmare and it wakes you up, you think, oh, it was only a dream. But there was some part of you that knew that you were having a dream, and can easily make the translation to, oh, I was in the dream state, or dream consciousness. And then there's a concept called Turiyatita. And it literally means, it's a Sanskrit word, it means beyond the fourth. And if Turiya is the fourth, then Turiyatita is beyond the fourth. And it's a fifth natural state where the witness, Turiya, sometimes called the witness or the God self, dissolves into everything that is witnessed, leaving only pure non-dual unity. Turiyatita can also be considered ever-present ground or stateless condition of all other states, and the union of emptiness and form. And if you have a nature that likes to explore, kind of these philosophical or find aspects, there's a link here, and I'll make these slides available to anyone that wants them. And you can explore some of those deeper. And then one thing that Audley insisted over and over is that you can only see yourself. And I always, used the self with the capital S. That's like the Turiya self, or the God self, or the Atman in some of Audley's talks. He called it that, the higher self, the upper self. And he said, you can only see yourself. And if you look at other people and you see things that upset you, he says, that's the things you need to work on in your life. And if you see things that you really admire and you appreciate them, he says, those are the things that you've achieved in the awakening of your own consciousness. And so I've started a book a few years ago, and hopefully I'll finish it while I'm still in this world. But I was going to call the book "You Can Only See Yourself," and I thought it would be appropriate to have a mirror on the front cover, in honor of Audley. And then we've got a few minutes here. I'd like to go through this. This is his picture of the kingdom of God, and he showed what we are, the little part dangling down at the bottom, the little egg. In a sense that, it's a cocoon of energy, or a shield of energy around us, or our aura, we may want to cause it. And then the problem with trying to draw maps like this and explain it is all these things are within. So what really looks like, he would draw it two-dimensionally so that he could help us understand what we were doing and where we were going. But, and so he spread it out. And it took me a long time to realize, because I kept going in myself, and I didn't see it really in the same way. So I began to explore it deeper and deeper. And I found that, all these things are really what we would say, in the crown chakra at the top of the head. That's where all of these things exist and reside, but they're really very compressed, and as Rusty might think, multi dimensions at the edge of the universe, or multiple worlds, but they're not so much spread out as they're within you. And as you still the mind, you can experience and know these things, and you can try to get into that ball of white light that's kind of at the center of the drawing. And when you have that, generally you have an awareness of the whole being, the whole universe, of what you truly are, and you realize you're that consciousness. And here he shows that it seems in the drawing that you go on beyond that, and you're at what he called the small circle up there at the bottom of the large circle, and he called that the oversoul. And he said that's what we really are, and we are an expression of the divine that comes out of that center void darkness. And he shows all of that, and then the rays that come out, and he draws the rays. He says there should be one for every sentient being, but he drew it so that you could see that there's a ray of consciousness or an expression, and it expresses not on the edge of the great supreme, but really it expresses as you, as an exact image, duplicate of that supreme. And if you move into that in consciousness and in awareness, then you have a knowing and a presence just like he did. And it's available, free for everybody. And he called that the great supreme, is what he referred to the upper part. And then the oversoul, or the soul pattern right here, the Godhead, this beautiful white light. The sensory experience world, or the sensory world, is all of this. And included in the traditions, especially made more clear for me in the traditions of Kriya Yoga, the sensory experience, the mind, what we know as the mind, and we say we're going to start meditating, and you close your eyes and you sit there. The mind is actually just another sense organ, and the mind senses thoughts arising in the field. And so that's what we are. And then there's these sheaths that cover the body. I mean, and he tries to draw those, and these are the sheaths here that are reflected in the Great Supreme, or here. Same thing here. But it's when you get closer to the center of that, you hit this realm in here that you can start feeling a blissful feeling, and it can be overwhelming. It can be so great because it feels so wonderful. And when you touch that, that's a clue to a teacher that, well, you're making good progress, but you're not there yet. And so if you start feeling too much of that bliss and that oneness with all things, you haven't gone all the way into the source. You're still at the edge, and you need to practice more. And then intelligence sheath, the wisdom sheath, that's a part where we can know things directly. When you touch that sheath, or that level of awareness, and that's often described as these the blue areas, or the aspects of yourself in the drawing. When you touch that, if you take a thought into that, literally a thought about anything, if you want to pray and bless someone, if you take them in and ask the divine to bless them, they'll get the greatest healing. If you want to know something, even the answer to a math problem that you're struggling with, or a challenge in an emotional relationship, you can go into that, and you won't. Sometimes you'll have a direct knowing and a direct revealed knowledge of it. Sometimes it comes to you, someone comes up and talks to you and tells you about it. Someone gives you a book, you find an article on the internet, but there's lots of ways. But if you open yourself and you project that into that intelligence sheath, you have revealed knowledge, and you can know all things. When someone gets that, it's another God state. And then the mind sheath, the lower thought processing, it's an organ of thought, and it simply sees the thoughts that arise in your mind. And when you sit down to meditate, most people, when they first start, there's lots of activity in the mind. And when they get lost in that activity, they think, oh, this is so hard. It's my mom's beating me. My boss is yelling at me. All these things, and all the stresses, and and there's the coronavirus, and there's all these things that you're worried about, and are they going to give us a stimulus, and all this stuff. It just fills the mind. Well, if you sit still and you practice the meditation techniques, all of those thoughts begin to slow down, and then you begin to move beyond it. And when you do, you find a great peace. And then the life force or the vitality sheath, it's our breath. And without the breath, and that's why this precious human birth, we're the only level, this is the only level where you can actually breathe in the life force and you can experience it. You can touch it, you can feel it. And if you practice Qigong or Tai Chi or any of the traditions in that way, or any of the meditation traditions, if you practice those, you become aware of that life force. And that's what we do in the beginning meditation. And then the physical sheath, it's the meat body that we're in, it's food, it's the physical body. And if you take good care of it, you rest well, you eat properly, you can experience that in a very beautiful way. And I think I got excited and I didn't do the initial meditation, which I like to start with. So right now, I think you can only see yourself, and then the kingdom of man. This is the first drawing he did. I think this is a good place to kind of wrap up and summarize, and then to have a little bit of a meditation, and then we can take a break and take questions. And so I would ask you just to sit still, to close your eyes. It helps if you sit upright, and it helps if you're not in pain and relaxed and have on comfortable clothing. The first thing you do to center is simply take a deep breath. And then take a second breath. And then usually by a third breath, you can calm the mind and feel much better. And when you do that in centering, if you can imagine just focusing at the top of your head, and if you hold your energy there or hold your awareness there, you can begin to relax and to feel that presence. You can, if you're very still, you can realize that there's some part of you that's aware of you in consciousness, that's aware of you sitting and focusing. If you have trouble concentrating at the top of the head, just concentrate at the center of the forehead, what's the third eye. And you can sometimes, I know in some of the techniques, they encourage you to feel the breath flowing in and out through those doorways in the body. And it's a way to help you center. And when you sit to center in meditation and to calm yourself, you can relax. And as you are more calm and as your breathing begins to slow down, and there's direct relationships between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And as the breath process slows down, you enter more of the inner knowing states. And you can see and hear on those levels. But it also will lower your blood pressure, reduce stress, reduce tension, and help you to find greater peace in your life and in the world around you. So we'll take just a moment to concentrate in that way. If the mind wanders and there's too much activity, it helps if you have a small prayer that you can repeat to yourself, or a mantra, or you can focus on some image with eyes closed or with eyes open. If you focus on an image, like whatever religious tradition that you're in, think of the Christ, if that's appropriate for you, or the Buddha, or any image that takes you in the direction and the fulfillment that you want. And just hold that in your awareness for a few moments. and then to kind of bring our consciousness back, especially at a time of the year like this and the great transitions that we're in. I like to go to the highest point I can go in my own awareness and ask that divine God self to flow into all beings, and to I always start with my own sense and my own awareness, and to flow that light in and to lift me up and to help me. And then I ask that that's shared with all those that come into my sphere of influence or my sphere of communication, like people listening to a lecture, to bless them and to help them, and then into all beings. And sometimes we'll see that image of the earth floating in space, so that I can engulf the entire world in that uplifting, purifying, and transforming energy of awareness and healing. And then I open my eyes and come back to physical awareness, and I'll stop the share at this point, and we can
people can unmute themselves now if they want.
Yeah.
That privilege has been returned.
And if you have questions, and again, thank you for all of you that made this possible, especially to you, Connie, and thank you to all of you that took time from your day to join and to share, and I sure appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Ben, I have a question.
Sure.
When we're doing meditation, we go to those points where we just blank out. We lost any conscious train of thought.
Yep.
What's happening?
Well, there's the most typical thing that happens is we go to sleep, and we're not rested, and we're just tired, and we drop. And I notice when that happens to me, a lot of times, my head falls over a little bit like this, and I sit there and I'm asleep, and and I can't do much. And when that happens, like I've been.
Wait.